Well, thank you everyone for joining us. This is yet another edition of Techno Brew, and today I've got the pleasure of speaking with Troy Latter, who is a tech strategist and tech ethicist. And Troy, thank you for joining us. Welcome to the show.
Oh, pleasure, Carlos. I really enjoying it, looking forward to it, and welcome to the Techno Brew audience. Hope you're having a brew with us.
So tell me, how does one become a tech strategist and an ethicist? I mean, it's a very timely topic, ethics, when we're talking about AI today. Concerns about AI these days, whether they're warranted or not. I'm really glad we're having this conversation. So please tell me about your journey.
Yeah, look, there is no single journey for anybody, and I think everybody should take that on board. So mine is not typical or unique, and I don't think anyone will copy mine. So I think, like technology, it's a bit of a hold on and ride the lightning type of thing, and just go where you can and go where things need to. So I've pivoted a lot. I really have. I did economics at university. Didn't really like. I thought I was going to be like the first accountant to ever go and work at KPMG in board shorts, but they thought you had to wear a blue suit and a white shirt, so we didn't gel very well. Uh, and then a couple of years of traveling sort of said, hey, there's a big world out there, and when you come from Australia, life is different. So I do like to go all over the shop because my work's been all over the shop. I've worked in national security for 10 years, in emerging technology. I've sold houses to defence, and I've done a whole heap of things. And the only thing I always come back to is that the bits of technology that I really like are the bits that enable people really to have better lives. Technology is hard. Everyone's someone else's IT support. And I've been really fortunate to do that on really large scales. You know, I've done that for governments. I've done that for countries. I've done that for things that involve tens of millions of people. So when you do things at scale, that's where AI really has some power and impact, not so much in the news that we keep reading about and getting scared about. We do some really cool things with it.
Absolutely. And contrary to popular belief, perhaps, I mean, AI has been around for the better part of over 30 years, right?
30, 40, 50, you know, they talk about it, the researchers talked about it in the 50s. And so I think, you know, we talk about it for the last 6 months like it's bread and butter. I think a lot of society talks about it for the last 5 or 10 years.
What are some of the common misconceptions about AI that should be dispelled and properly addressed so we can have a meaningful discussion?
Yeah, there's a lot. And look, I am a massive proponent for any technology that enables things. And when we get to the ethics bit later, you'll see that I also want the guardrails there to sort of protect us, you know, but I do want the goodness that comes out of it for sure. I think the first thing is that it will replace humans. I mean, every headline, jobs gone, but no one's looking at jobs created.
Yeah.
You know, for your peers and colleagues and folk listening and people, especially in the recruitment and the talent industry and the skills game, you're totally aware of how the jobs are being created. You know, 80% of the jobs that our kids will do are not invented today. Think about the job titles that are coming across your desk, the people you're meeting at barbecues, and they tell you what you do, and you go, what the hell's that? Because that's a new job. That's something that's been created. And it's way beyond the data scientist and data engineer, you know, and again, those roles are expanding and educational units are taking them up. I think it's really exciting about how many new jobs are created. And there's plenty of stats out there from really smart companies that have done it. They just don't get the airtime in the headlights, I think. I think AI is going to be good at automating all those tasks that are dumb, but they're not going to be good at doing a lot of things that people still need. Not in the near 3, 5, 10 years. 80% of the jobs that our kids will do aren't created yet. It's been true for the last sort of 4 generations. The other thing is that we don't think about it for AI, and the myth is that it's good all the time, and not so much ethically and and things, but environmentally, it's really important for us to all know. And I'm going to probably mention it later.
Yeah.
But the footprint of AI is terrible. And if you use Gen AI to make yourself a 5,000 word paper, so you don't have to, just for the hell of it, it probably drains as much energy as making a cup of coffee. So around the world, we now have zillions of people, and even, the organization in itself has come out this week and saying, stop using it. You're draining our servers. I think it's costing nearly $1 million a day just to run the compute power behind that one company. And the myth that fixes it really becomes hard when it becomes interoperable later. And I think that's one of the big challenges that AI has. I advise governments on AI. I advise big organizations, global organizations, on how to utilize it to their benefit. So I do know a few things, but even I know that there's good bits, positives and negatives. But the cool thing about generative AI, and it goes back to that, if Go can do one thing, generative can do many things. And I get really excited. And I haven't found anyone that's used any of the tools that hasn't been excited about what it does. It really does bring forward Star Trek and all those sorts of future things where we used to do something and say, open the door. I need to understand this. Show me what's happening on that planet. If I landed there, what would happen? And all of a sudden you can have a conversation with it. It's going to go more than a helper. I think where I like seeing it is how it's actually going to help people, elderly people, neurodiverse people, and people that actually just we don't think of. But one of the really exciting things is that it allows you to automate at a speed we haven't been able to do. Businesses are using this with a power to say, well, I used to require developers and programmers. And for people like you who recruit for global 500, global 100, global 50 IT companies, you're going to start thinking, is a developer really required anymore? I think that'll be automated. It'll be, I just want that, copy it over, it's already there. Or even better, infrastructure as a code starts coming. I'm now not worried about recreating. And so you're doing things on scale that just happen so fast. The good thing is it'll improve things. Robots are really good for taking dirty, dusty and dangerous tasks and making them safe. AI, it's a part of robotics, it's a part of quantum, it's a part of all the things we do. So it will actually improve a lot of what we do as well, whether that's healthcare, transportation, logistics. It's probably been used, as we said earlier, for 20 or 30 years. I mean, we don't get our Amazon parcels overnight or in 24 hours or in weeks without a lot of AI behind that, both in the supply and the demand, the ordering, the transportation. So lots of cool things. Some of the downside, something I read yesterday is they're taking off Amazon stores books that have been written by ChatGPT. Just total fake books,
Right.
Please write me a 30,000 book on space. Print. $2.99 on Amazon. People are buying it going, wow, space is under Earth. So the power of it is really bad when it gets there. I mentioned before the environmental consumption of it. And environmental AI is really interesting. Sometimes environmental AI is about using AI to save the environment. And my organization, Tech for Humanity, likes doing that a lot. But the other part of environmental AI is making sure that it's not actually harming the environment by using it. Computers are amazing, but they take a lot of power. As these algorithms have progressed, so is computing. We talk about the fact that those big rooms full of computers existing still, those supercomputers, the computers that are still driving this analytics and algorithms enough to help us get to space or to do quantum computing or to do things that we haven't heard of. So we're always going to need more and more power and more grunt to sort of do these things.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that is, as it becomes more and more ubiquitous, AI is famous for about making mistakes about people, whether it's facial recognitions, profiling for nefarious activities in society or criminal activities. There's plenty of that. And even in the recruitment industry, there's been a lot of bias and changes that have happened. Amazon was famous for training all of its recruitment models on its history of the past. And then they realized, and they self-called it out in about 2019, that their past was actually very male dominated. Yeah. So they trained the data on the wrong data, which made the the process even worse.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. I mean, New York's taken that, probably leading the world in that at the moment, that in New York in recruitment, you have to have an audit on your AI. You have to start doing a bias check to make sure that you can prove that your process is not biased in any way. And it's a really interesting market to see where that'll become. And I think, for you, if you looked into your systems and the way you use AI, you're going to have to start, coming back to me and saying, hey, Troy, can you show us and check that my systems are all ethical and auditable? Because I don't know if they are. And that's one of the things we hadn't thought about before. We love the power, but we forget that it's got to have some guardrails.
It's reintegrating, I guess, the human component into the accelerated process that AI brings to bear. And I'm thinking about the example of Sumit Shah, the CEO of Dukin, who laid off 90% of his customer support team because an AI supposedly can do it better at 80% less cost in a fraction of the time that it takes for a human being to troubleshoot and to resolve a customer complaint.
There is no doubt that major organizations, governments, and customers that I have are really interested in reducing costs and using technology and AI to do that. Call centers and those sorts of things are ripe for it. Elon Musk has shown with his crazy X moves recently that sacking 75% of staff, although it's had an impact on revenue, it's had a huge reduction on costs, and it hasn't impacted service. So my understanding is that a lot of organizations at the moment are looking at doing exactly that thing. How can I just lay off people and get away with that? So companies aren't what they used to be when, our parents grew up and were loyal. We all know that. They're savage. So I think they'll do what they need to do to make money. The bit about hating talking to the AI and stuff, I think a couple of things are converging there. The old KYC, or know your customer, thing is really important. So it's not actually as dumb as it used to be waiting there. So quite regularly with a couple of button presses, you actually are getting a result where it used to be doubly painful. The voice bots, the transcription services, the ability to problem solve, use sentiment analysis and all that automatically, it really does change it. There's so many products out there that can totally make things really efficient. But one of the things I think is really interesting, and it's probably not for us to answer, but for our kids, is that they don't mind it so much. They've grown up with it. Yesterday, I had to do another police check for one of my customers, and it's a standard process. And for the last 10 or 15 years, every time I've gone to a customer and gone through this process, it's been manual, and I've hated it, and I've whinged. This is old pen paper. Then I've got to go and photocopy my passport, and then I've got to go and then I've got to get someone to sign it. That was terrible. But yesterday I jumped on and they'd automated that process and they'd made it twice as long because none of the processes worked, and it was all these different, had to download this app and then take a photo. I was like, oh, the paper thing was better. So just because there's a solution doesn't mean you have to use it. And you've got to really think the people at the end of this stuff. There's an answer for everything. But I think, for me, I see a lot of implications of where sort of things are taking. But where are you seeing at the moment? Like, where do you think, from your view and your organization, where are you sort of seeing the implications of this sort of AI on the workforce for your area and your customers?
I think it's more of a displacement in terms of where the human workforce is going to be focused on. So, the more mundane, more menial tasks are going to be done really well, probably by AI with some directions. There's going to be, a learning curve. If I'm working with a new virtual assistant, I'm going to have to put in some time and effort to make sure that it understands what I want, what I need it to do, so that I can then let go and let it do its thing. Where I think it'll be hard pressed for an AI to take on responsibility would be where there's a customer facing or some kind of relational problem that human intuition, emotional quotient is really going to come into play. something that Jeffrey Hinton said at Collision, where he was talking about the impact of the job market. It's going to be a shift in skills. And I think about what you said a little bit earlier, where jobs that kids in 20 years are going to be doing haven't even been invented or created yet. The other thing is the problem, I guess, of misinformation and spin and polarization. It feels like to me that there isn't a panaceic solution across the board, and that not everybody's on the same page. And so it very much feels like the Wild West to me. So having someone like you come on and shed some light on what we can expect, I guess, in the short term and the long term, there's a certain comfort there. At least somebody knows what's going on, or at least has an idea of what's going on.
Yeah, I appreciate your confidence, but ideas are like eyes, I suppose, aren't they? Everyone's got a couple of them, you know.
Thank you for that example.
Yeah, I think you're right. You do spend a lot of time training these sorts of things too, and I think a lot of people fall over there. It's been really interesting watching in my household, and I suppose with my colleagues I work with, that just using ChatGPT and these things, you know, you've actually got to use a lot of effort to get a good result, and sometimes you can't be bothered. I'm writing a paper at the moment specifically on how AI will affect not only the consulting industry, the top end of town, but more specifically the recruitment and IT industry. And AI has been pretty well used in recruitment for a lot of years. You know, whether you're buying SaaS services from somebody else and consuming them, or even using off-the-shelf stuff, you know, there's a lot of things there. So the bigger end of town are really starting to invest in it, and the small and mid-tier players are going to have to work out how they consume services to keep up with it. So, you know, chatbots, they seem dumb and stupid, but they add a lot of real value and really get people through the system quickly. Resume screening tools. Well, most of us have some sort of tool to pass information and get benefits out of it. We don't have time to read every single resume anymore. But then what? Well, then you want to do some predictions around it. You know, you want a tool that's going to say, here's some predictive analysis of this job meets and this candidate meet this company. And that's where it starts getting complex. This company, well, what's this company? Is it the mission statement? Is it the fact that Mary or John or Frederica, the manager, have got a certain personality and you need to match it to that team? Or is it there because they're growing or scaling? So when you start putting those elements in, obviously we know AI isn't going to be able to do that off the cuff, but it will over time start training it, because it'll start reading the news. It'll start, you know, when you look at Microsoft buying LinkedIn, they didn't buy it just because they wanted a job platform, but the information they get between all of us searching each other and people looking and posting jobs and the rest of it, they're understanding, if not predicting and making the market. You could make an argument to say that they make the market by creating demand in certain areas just through the job market, which actually just keeps extrapolating and growing. But we want the benefit of it, so we use it. It's like social media. We gave away so many freedoms for benefits. We're doing the same with all our AI. But I think further, you know, video interviewing tools, we're using one now. This is AI at some level. Candidate matching tools. For me, I think that's somewhere that's really going to grow, and I don't know how it's going to scale for everybody, but I know at the top end of town, Amazon's, Google's, all these companies that have 500,000, 1 million employees, the way that they're using their tools internally is sort of having to change. We've got a skill shortage everywhere in the world. We don't know how to build these new skills that we need for AI that we're talking about, which is growing. So we're seeing a lot of AI itself matching job skills and jobs families that wouldn't fit for future skills. And so I think it'll get to the stage where you'll be able to put in your CV and say, hi, I'm Troy. I did a Bachelor of Science. I've been working as a chemist for the last 5 years, but I really, really want to be a vet. What do I have to do? You know, and the AI will go, wow, it's already done science. You've already done this. You're a hard worker. You've got 5 years. If you only did these 2 micro credentials, I could match you to that job, and that job market is open. It's ready in 6 months, and you'll start building a train. And I think that's what AI will really help this industry do, is build the funnel life cycle and make the efficiencies versus a project springing up or a demand springing up and the market not being ready for it. And this will tie the institutions better. Last week, I was doing some work with the Queensland AI Hub. Their job is to advise the Queensland government on AI. And there was work happening with the University of Queensland and the Queensland University of Technology. And they're asking, what courses should we offer next year? Do I do more data scientist courses? Do I do data engineer courses? What's the difference? How do we sort of predict the market of where the jobs are coming so I can get the education cycle? And while there's no perfect answer, it is that alignment, I think, that we're going to start seeing from 15-year-olds to the job market much quicker, where AI is going to show me this is the skills you've got, this is the path the jobs that are open to you, go. And as a recruiter, you're just going to be an orchestrator, a really different way of doing your business as to today. I think the next 3 or 6 months for these sorts of industries is going to be really interesting. You're going to see a huge demand, obviously, for skills that you haven't seen in AI, again, promoting that new jobs type thing. Reskilling, I don't know where we're going to get enough people to do the jobs. There's jobs sitting there at the top end that are vacant, even though there's tight employment marks. It's because we don't have the skills, so they're important. I mentioned some sort of collaboration with academia. So no matter where you are in the recruitment cycle, industry leverage, or even just thinking about AI, look at what the universities are doing and try and bring them into your business, because they're dying to bring that AI into it. And don't forget soft skills. People, policy, process, always beat technology. I'm a big fan of humans. Go humans. We can do whatever we want. Just make sure the technology's there to help us. I think there's a few things. I mean, technology is still changing. There's some growth to come. And I suppose before we think about what those different techs are, you've got to think about just that impact a little bit locally and for you, and for me. So in Australia at the moment, we've got a massive growth in scientists and engineers and those sorts of things that people need. But we're not seeing that growth between industry, government, and academia. In the EU at the moment, there's the biggest skills gap anywhere in the world is in the EU at the moment, probably apart from Africa, because I don't think there's statistics down there. But they're putting regulations and business investments in place to really change that. The US isn't doing that. Australia, Asia isn't doing that. Asia's taking a really different approach to it as well. The government sets up lots of different hotspots of technology and they super invest in them. And this is outside of China, but Thailand, Singapore, Malaysia are really starting to step up in this sort of space. So Australians, Americans, Canadians, we all need to start thinking what else is happening and look over your shoulder a bit more, which is sort of a good thing about that. We think this is new and we go back and we make all these new rules. And I'm doing some work at the moment in a new area of technology called neurotechnology and brain-computer interface. Elon Musk's talking about putting a chip in your head. I think about it really differently. I do a lot of work in the metaverse and VR, and I know that when I've got my goggles on, it's looking at my micro expressions. It's reading exactly all of my data and sharing it. It knows when I'm enjoying something and not enjoying it. But we've had things in our head that are computer related for 30 or 40 years. There's an Australian company famous called Cochlear that does implants to make deaf people hear. That's a brain computer interface. So I don't need a whole set of rules and regulations to address this. And it's the same as AI. We've got really good frameworks for everything that we do in our world. The finance industry is very good at transacting transparently so people don't rip off the world. AI is the same. It just needs those standards so it's not like the Wild West that you talked about. It needs some sort of global standard that everyone accepts that this is the baseline. And the EU is really driving it at the moment. And you're seeing that come out in some of the legislation. And it does have to with that emerging technology. So quantum, that's those big computers doing really big things fast and making decisions. So it's the next sort of huge jump in computing. Edge computing is really important now. That's where we don't have a central thing processing all of our computer. We're actually using it at the phone at the edge, or we're using it when Netflix, you download something, you're not downloading it from America all the time. It comes to your local server for you in Toronto, and probably then even locally, and then you just download once and then you keep downloading it. For industry and governments and companies, that means they want to be out there right near the people, so things are fast and latency isn't there. That's going to be important, as is AR and VR. I don't know if you're a fan of it or you've got a set of goggles, but I'm doing a lot of work with training, safety, neurodivergent people, and education in the metaverse and in virtual reality, because the learning for a lot of people when they're experiential is just so different.
Yeah, I think that's pretty exciting. Meeting people where they're at, and where they're able to thrive and excel best, instead of a traditional model of this is how you learn, this is how you'll do well.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I didn't think about it much growing up. I suppose we all didn't. We were just victims of our age, but we measure people against these standards that are just really interesting all the time. But for me also, my 8-year-old has some special needs, and watching where the AI can evolve for her. We've got things where we've got glasses that have augmented reality or Bluetooth connectivity that we can use AI to give her messages that we don't have to talk to in front of other people. I'm using AI for my parents on their doorbell so that they know who's answering the door on their phone. So we're all going to keep reading that someone's hacked something, and we're going to read that someone's done something bad. We always have. Since wherever we lived in the day, we're going to have stories of outlaws and terrible people doing terrible things. But for me, I glass half full. I know how bad paper is for our systems. We were talking earlier about losing something. I checked into a hotel yesterday and they wanted a photocopy of my passport, and I'm thinking, why? I wonder how many passports photocopies I've left around the world now. What are they doing with that? And then people say, oh, but you're putting it in a system and it's unsafe. And I'm thinking, okay. So we get caught up in stuff that we don't need to. I'm a play on type of person. I like finding solutions. So, for you and your team and for the listeners, I'm sure we'll find some ways to go forward and do some really cool things.
Absolutely. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I feel very optimistic about the future of AI. The message that I got from you resoundingly was an enablement tool to help us to do better work in a more effective manner. So that's going to be my takeaway. And I really want to thank you, Troy, for having this conversation with me. How do we get in touch with you? How does the audience get in touch with you? Where can they find you?
LinkedIn's my main thing. I think anyone that wants to look up my name or look up my organization, so Troy Latter or Tech for Humanity, you'll find those obviously in the links. I'd say that's the best way to do it. I think it's interesting is that, like you say, this is great having these conversations, and you've got to have more. All the famous leaders in the world say you have to read books to be better. Maybe you don't in 2024, but you do have to read something, and you've got to upskill, continual learning. And so I think to get the benefit and understand how to get the time and efficiency gains, or use predictive or sentiment analysis or whatever with your customer base, you've got to keep reading and learning. So look, I'd encourage anyone to follow me on LinkedIn or Insta or all of the socials. You'll find them all on my website. But more importantly, just reach out. When I finish this paper in a couple of weeks, I should be able to release a fair bit of it. So I'll have some content. I don't think we really dived into the depth that's possible. So, if any of your readers or listeners need to understand more, I'm an Aussie. Just give us a call. We'll have a chat. Most of this stuff's pretty easy and fun. And if there's a reason to share value, then that's my job at the moment, is to give information back to make you have better decisions. So if it's enjoyable at the same time, we're all winners.
Troy, thank you so much for having this conversation with me. Appreciate your time. I know it's early morning for you. It's evening for me.
Always tomorrow here. We are looking forward to the future, and come on down, listeners. Yeah. We love having visitors.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time, Troy.
No worries at all, mate. See you later.
All right. You have a great one. All right. Take care.
Bye.